Welcome back to the channel. Thank you guys for hanging with me on this Friday. And if you've taken some time out of your busy schedules to support my channel, hitting that like button, subscribing, leaving me a comment, I really appreciate you for that. All right, so most of my videos lately have revolved around bass pushing bait fish up on flats. You may not have a bunch of flats in your lake, or maybe you have a lot of grass and the grass is making a hard edge. You know, it's like a wall where bass are pushing bait up against it. It's going to be a little bit different. You know, if you have topped out hydrilla really thick, or maybe you have reed lines, the fish aren't always going to push the bait further past that. If it's a hard edge, they'll stop right there. Same things on steep rocky bank lakes like bluff walls. It's a great place for bass to push bait up to, but you're going to use different baits because they're not on flat. So for that, I really like a jig, and I'm going to go into a couple different styles of jigs that I think are very important this time of year. So anytime that you have bass that are on a stretch, it can be stretch of rocky bank, it can be a bluff wall, it can be a grass line where there's nothing really holding the fish in a specific spot. Now, the bass could group up and be in little specific spots, but there's nothing really there. And what you'll find on places like this, one day you'll have a bunch of waypoints right here. The next day they'll move down 50 yards, they'll be right here, but there's nothing obvious holding them. Most of the time on places like that, grass lines, bluff walls, you're gonna get a lot of your bites on the fall. Just how that works. And anytime that I'm getting a lot of bites on the fall, I go to a vertical line tie. In my opinion, a vertical line tie on a jig is a whole lot better when you have bass that are biting the bait on the fall. Bait looks more natural falling. It looks more natural when you're just straight reeling it. You know, swim jigs, it's always a vertical line tie. For that reason, you're swimming it back. Just the way the jig moves through the water, a lot better on the vertical line tie. So most all-purpose jigs, you're gonna see with that vertical line tie. Now, when you get on a spot, let's say it might be a little less steep rocky bank where it's a pretty obvious zone where the bass are at, or anytime you're around cover, some type of wood in the water, I like the horizontal line tie because I'm going to be pitching it to targets, and I will still get some bites on the fall. You always will, but you're getting more bites just fishing it, shaking it, moving it around the cover. This is going to make that bait stand up, look a lot more natural when it's sitting on the bottom. Now, we go back to the vertical line tie. When you're fishing in grass, you flip this into the grass. If they don't bite it on that initial fall, you're going to get like 90% of the bites that way. It's typically never you fishing it in the grass to get the bites. You know, like 1 out of 10. So I like this for that reason, because you're getting the bites on the fall. The same thing goes with the bluff wall. The bait's never just sitting there. You know, you're basically just feathering it down the side of the bluff wall. So here's your bluff wall. You pitch your jig up there, and it's basically just falling down the side of the wall. It looks a lot better when you have the vertical line tie. Now, if you're pitching this to a laydown or a stump, you really got to fish it. You know, so this is a much more fishable jig. And what I mean by fishable is it's on the bottom, you're working it. That's where this jig comes in handy, the horizontal. Now, there are some crosses. You may be fishing down a grass line and then you get around a dock. Or, you know, and for that instance, I like that vertical line tie. I've talked about that in other videos. Or let's say you're just covering water. You're going fast. You're making a pitch. It's hitting the bottom. You're working it a couple times, bringing it right back out. You're covering water. You're not so much into just slowing down. It's more so about covering water. That's when I like jigs that have the vertical line tie. And it's, you know, there's a ton of different jigs. You know, I want to say a Denny Brower jig is like that. You've got the Canterbury jig by Dirty Jigs, a Little Magnum by Beast Coast, a Bitsy flip. You know, all those jigs, they're set up like this, and that's a great jig to cast and just fish fast. You can flip it as well, but you're not so much about shaking. And a lot of cover, like grass, like little, situations like that, where you're not throwing it in there and thinking there's a fish there. If there's a fish anywhere on the bank, it's going to be right here. You don't know. You're just going, you're covering water, you're fishing fast. That's where that vertical. Horizontal is when you get on a place where there should be a bass right there, you can leave it in there, shake it, move it. It's not as random. That's where I really like this. Now, I talk about docks. Docks are one where both can work. If you're just covering a bunch of docks and the deal is fish as many docks, make as many casts, you're not, really focusing in on one dock, then I like that vertical. But when you know that I've got them patterned, they're all going to be on the back side of the dock, from the pier, to the boathouse, but they're all in that little area. Maybe the water's cold. Maybe there's something where you really have to keep that bait in there and fish it slow. That's where that horizontal line tie comes in. I can pitch it to a piece of wood and just fish it around that wood. And what's going to happen, why most ball heads are that way, is that bait's gonna be on the bottom. It's gonna look like a defensive crawfish. So it's there, you pop it up. It's not gonna sit perfectly like that all the time, but when you're shaking and moving it, it is gonna lift up that way. And that's gonna entice a lot of bites. But it all comes down to how you're fishing, the speed you're fishing, and the cover you're fishing. This is stuff I've learned in the last 10 years being a pretty big time jig fisherman all over Tennessee, Kentucky, Florida, Alabama, and that's what I've learned. So try that, guys. Good luck to you, and I'll see you on the water.